Okay, so Ciena fairly recently carried out a global survey looking at communication service providers and their attitude to the big topic of the day. I suppose it is AI. And perhaps we can start with the sort of headline finding. What was the main finding from the survey?
Sure, happy to talk about that. Firstly, I mean AI has been around in the industry in various forms for a long time, and also telcos have embraced it. But I think one of the reasons why we issued that survey was also to figure out which areas of AI is going to see more adoption than others. So I always like to split it into really three different areas. One is the traditional AI operations, right? So what are you getting from AI when you start using it in your customer service, in your planning? Really more the operational side that impacts how you run a network. So we have seen, actually, I'm talking about headlines in that survey, that most people believe that the networks are going to become a whole lot more efficient by the use of AI. The second part is always the more difficult one. What can AI do in terms of generating new revenues for you? And especially the telcos, which are living in a very hyperscaler dominated world, have struggled quite a bit with different technology introductions and how they can really intercept the revenue streams, kind of follow the money. And what we have seen this time is that there is quite a bit of enthusiasm and belief that AI will allow service providers to generate new revenues. And thirdly, in order to generate any new revenues, you got to have infrastructure that's available for you to sell. And so AI-ready networks was one of the other themes. And it was also very powerful how our customers confirmed our thinking that the multiples of speeds of capacity are going to be the new norm. And when the 100 gigabit became the old 10 gigabit, we're now talking about the 400 and 800 gigabit, even all the way out into the metro and access as edge compute hits. So really, people are actively pursuing investments in upgrading the software infrastructure, the networking, the switching, but also the optical infrastructure to deal with that demand.
Okay, perhaps we can drill down a little bit into each of those. So, as you say, the survey looked at the perceived AI network benefits, but perhaps you can give us, drill down into that. What are those benefits? What do people think that they're going to benefit from in terms of AI?
Absolutely. The one thing I want to say up front, independent of the surveys, I believe our industry has, a lot of the best engineers that have architected and operated networks for decades, right? So it's not surprising that while we expect benefits from AI, it's not revolutionary that, AI operating a network will generate 30, 40, 50, or 100% more capacity. One journalist asked me the other day saying, "Hey, Jürgen, what do you think? Do you think the benefits of AI operations will outweigh the additional traffic AI is going to put on the network?" And I was smiling because I was like, if you run networks currently between 60 and 80% load, AI is not going to give you, another multiplier of that. So having said that, so where AI will absolutely bring benefits is in a holistic view on the customer experience to begin with, right? So when you look at networks, things go wrong, right? There are a lot of moving elements in there, but the way you react to that, the time you take to restore them is what AI can absolutely help with. And believe it or not, we have been doing predictive network failure analysis for many years using AI, and it absolutely has a proven track record of helping you to, deploy resources ahead of time, where you need to do proactive maintenance or preventative maintenance to avoid even failures. And what AI does now in that segment is it allows us to incorporate a whole lot more data, especially generative AI with the ability to build scenarios to say, hey, I'm going to incorporate, the building plans or the construction plans of an area. I'm going to see what the weather patterns are doing. I'm going to see what other events might be happening. So AI can incorporate a whole lot more data that we couldn't in the past. And that's going to be one of the big changes. And our study has shown that our customers also believe in that. And second element of when you run a network, you got to understand what your customers are doing with that connectivity. Of course, in the residential space, what is the primary driver for bandwidth consumption? It's video. But we also, like you and I are talking about Zoom, there's a lot of real-time communication happening. But in enterprises, there might be very different traffic. And then you look at the demography, you and me will have very different demands on the network than, the kids, the 12-year-olds, or maybe an older part of our society who is, traditionally maybe more on the broadcast side, traditional phone calls. By understanding that, you can really make an impact on how you spend your money, where do you invest in network capacity. Whereas, talking about generating revenue, how do you put bundles together because you understand your customers better? Maybe if you have a quad play with mobile, you could be offering, a heavy user like me, maybe a roaming package for the holidays to say, hey, I'm going, of course the operator wouldn't know where I'm going, but there's a high likelihood of somebody sitting behind a screen all year long and consuming a lot of traffic that he will be traveling. And then you can, build some packages that allow you to get the extra dollar or two of ARPU out of that customer.
Yeah, I was going to obviously come on to it. So is that the main sort of AI-driven revenue, better understanding of the customer, therefore you can sort of monetize potential opportunities, or are there other sort of AI-driven revenue opportunities outside of better customer intelligence, if you like?
Look, it's a great question, and honestly, there is still a lot of unknown on where additional revenues are being generated. But there are two areas where we are sure. The one I've already spoken about, it's kind of tailoring the services better to your customers, but also selling your network a whole lot more targeted into AI applications. While the entire AI ecosystem is only coming online, the big data centers are being built, which will take a couple of years for them to come online. We will then see the adoption of a global developer base that comes up with new applications for you and me personally, but also for enterprises. And then the network will be very, very important in, number one, creating access to those new services, but also transferring, for example, enterprise data into an AI application to get it processed and get it, sent back with the value add to the user. So really the second one is about how can you monetize your network as part of an AI application. And that's where people are spending time on readying their networks and their services offering today to participate in that.
And I think if I remember correctly, the third one was about how networks potentially need to be, if not upgraded, at least they need to be ready for all this AI traffic. But then I think you said at the start, obviously, it's not a sort of exponential growth. So it's not like, but in terms of the feeds and speeds, is it going to put certain pressure on folks to at least ensure that their networks are, optimized for the traffic that might be headed their way?
So I think nobody has a crystal ball on how much or how little and where in the network really the traffic impacts it. But if you just look at the fact that data center capacity is going to triple over the next 3 to 5 years in Europe and Asia, it's kind of an indication that a lot more data is going to flow left and right, up and down, into training the models, into inferring as more users interact with an AI. But to answer your question, the underlying readiness comes by making your network available really as a service. And while this is a very overused term, now more than ever, it is one that we need to make reality, to put APIs on top of our network so that, a machine can call for resources. A machine can actually call for maybe bandwidth or maybe prioritization. And this could be very, short periods of time where that is required. But those are the type of kind of requests to the network that can also generate revenues for our service providers. If we do it in a good old way of just putting more capacity out there because the over-the-top applications are just going to fill it up and we're going to build more capacity, it's not going to be a win-win-win situation because somebody's going to hold the bag, investing in infrastructure and not being able to monetize it. And I want to use, 5G has been the latest example where billions have been spent in infrastructure and not everyone has been able to really monetize that accordingly.
And then I think the survey also touched on the sort of job impact related to AI. And I know the pessimists suggest that there's going to be millions of us sort of laid off, sat at home because of all the things that AI is going to do instead of us. And others think that it's more going to augment our roles so that we can work alongside it. Just, what did the survey uncover in terms of the CSPs and their thoughts on AI and jobs?
So the survey actually painted a very positive picture for us as an industry, but also for the labor involved, because everybody, expects that there is a net add in jobs. And while there were a couple of variances, of course, depending on which country we conducted this survey, People believe that AI will bring efficiencies, but that will again free up OpEx and labor that can be deployed elsewhere. And while I, not the chief historian here, I like to compare this digital revolution that we're in with AI right now, this platform shift, to the industrial revolution, where a lot of jobs were lost when automation came in, sensors and telecommunication, but a lot of wealth was generated in the long term. And when you look at all the investments that are happening, not only by hyperscalers, but also governments investing money in AI, it's not for them to destroy jobs. It's to create new GDP, new streams. And we are seeing that not only by, stimulus investments into data center and infrastructure, but also in the educational system. And this is a very important factor for us to stay relevant in the game of AI as humans.
You mentioned just briefly there about the regional differences, and in terms of the overall survey, it'd be good to understand because it's a global survey. So did you discover some significant variations across the globe, or has everyone more or less got the same kind of attitudes and etc. to AI, or were there some interesting differences?
Yeah, so there were quite a few differences, but they were primarily on the aspect of how do you participate in the value extraction game? So how do you make money from that AI boom? And while we have a couple of countries and operators that are really, embracing the gold rush, they're trying to level up their game from being a connectivity provider into, hey, we're going to be a full service, GPU as a service kind of provider for a certain country. Others are defaulting to, okay, I'm going to run the most efficient pipe. I'm going to run it lean. I'm going to have the best cost, the best service, but they're not interested in the monetization aspect. And not talking about intent of individual customers, the response in the survey was interesting where, for example, India is very bullish. They say, hey, AI is going to help 95% of us to generate new revenues by monetizing the AI traffic. Whereas in the US, they're a little less confident, where you see only 55% of respondents are saying, okay, AI traffic is going to create new revenues.
Yeah, is there any, you give me two examples there, and it's probably wrong of me to sort of extrapolate a general sort of theory, but is it fair to say that maybe in the same way that sort of 5G and mobile networks perhaps have got the fastest momentum in developing countries where they haven't got any legacy infrastructure? Is this similar with AI, that companies that they'll use it more, whereas more mature, shall we say, economies are perhaps less whatever, they're not as quick to adopt it, or is that just is that nonsense? Tell me if it is.
So look, I think this is you hit on a couple of great points, right? The maturity of a technology adoption will always, kind of skew the results in such a survey. And I mean, the US is the global capital of AI, Gen AI, period, hands down. But maybe to talk about the two specifics, India and the US. So in India, there is still, an ecosystem where the service providers are owning and operating fiber infrastructure. So even if you have a multinational, a global cloud company coming in, they are customers of the service provider. They cannot own their own fiber infrastructure today. And that by itself is, of course, driving a whole lot more optimism that there is monetization on the AI traffic that's to be had. And that's independently, of the adoption rate. It's just regulation that is driving different behavior there.
And in terms of industry sectors, again, I don't know, was there any sort of indication in the survey as to where the opportunities are in terms of who's doing what, or was it just a general sort of excitement that AI opportunities exist right across the sectors?
So of course, there's quite a bit of difference in terms of the adoption, the excitement of AI. And while, as I said earlier, we are at the very beginning of the AI adoption, the use cases, the applications that have been created, the usual sectors stand out, right? You have the entertainment space, you have the finance sector, and you have, the industrial side, industrial automation, and so on. And while these are the publicly discussed ones more than anything else, it is because they also represent a big portion of our customers' revenues. So that's why they're receiving the attention. Innovation is happening all across, right? It's as I said, entertainment, but also healthcare. We've heard a lot about, protein folding, in the material science space. Just yesterday, a new magnet material was announced, which can save a lot of energy and rare earth materials. So it's really happening all across, but the ones that stood out for sure were, entertainment, finance and banking, and the automation sector.
And in terms of what CSPs need to do, just be good perhaps in finishing, if you've got any thoughts, key bits of advice, because obviously it's a huge opportunity as we've discussed, but are there some obvious things the CSPs need to do to make sure that they're ready to take advantage of it, as opposed to watching some of their competitors sort of leap ahead and they're sort of scratching their heads thinking why aren't we getting this business, if you like it?
Right. It's really the billion-dollar question today on where do you focus your efforts and how do you participate. But I think depending on what your profile it is as a service provider, you will need to participate in all of them, but the extent varies. So the first one is, of course, infrastructure. You cannot just sit and wait until something is, happening over the top and then you start building out infrastructure. That hasn't played out well for us in a couple of instances in the past. But the survey has shown that people are aware of that. They're making active plans and that they're spending money on that infrastructure, which is great. Secondly, running your network better. While I said earlier that, incremental gains can be had, not multipliers, it is important from a reliability perspective, where and how you spend your CapEx, and then to smoothen out the operation as much as you can. So network management solutions, absolutely a critical aspect. And then thirdly, there's nothing more frustrating than if we have a problem, we call somebody and we don't get proper service right away. So the customer experience holistically, from network availability, reliability, easiness of ordering and receiving and consuming those services, but also the interaction with the service provider are critical. So the third one, customer experience, the customer at the center of focus and in the middle of your heart, that's really where I believe a lot of differentiation can be created. And fourthly, and that's a really difficult one, and I'm not going to talk too much about it because I'm not the expert, but the whole notion on security will become a very, very important topic beyond where it is today, because there are good AIs, but there might be also bad AIs. And in a world where quantum is around the corner, we absolutely got to keep an eye out on securing the services, the connectivity, and keeping our customers safe. Not every end user will be able to protect themselves against adversaries that have, huge budgets and, huge capabilities. So the service provider, I think, can play a very, very important role in that.
Okay, it's been great to chat to you, and some lovely insights into obviously the survey, and at the end there's some great bits of advice as to how CSPs can hopefully get themselves on the road to using and providing infrastructure for AI. So thank you very much indeed for your time, Jürgen. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me, Phil. Appreciate it.